Memphis. Late 1970s. Elvis Presley had just finished rehearsals at Graceland when he noticed a boy standing near the gates. The child's hands were full of candy boxes, his shoes worn thin. Tourists walked past. Elvis stopped. He didn't miss people. Tonight, he saw this one. Stories like this remind us that greatness isn't measured only by songs or fame, but by moments of kindness. If you want more forgotten stories of Elvis's heart, make sure you don't miss the next video, The Evening Air Outside. Graceland carried a faint mix of pine from the nearby trees and the exhaust of idling cars. Security guards stood near the gates, fans pressed close, hoping for a glimpse. Flashbulbs popped, voices rose and fell. Elvis Presley had just finished rehearsals and stepped out, his white jacket catching the glow of the security lights, and then a disruption. A small figure stood apart from the crowd. A boy no more than 10 clutching a cardboard box full of candy bars. The sign he held was crooked, written in black marker on torn cardboard. "Help my family." The letters were uneven, as though rushed by small hands. He shifted nervously, eyes down, his lips moving as if rehearsing a sales pitch. But when strangers brushed by, he fell silent. His sneakers were frayed, one sole nearly peeling off. The late summer air didn't mask the fact that this boy was out of place among the tourists and bodyguards. Elvis noticed. He slowed, pausing in mid-stride, while others kept moving. According to witnesses, his car was already waiting to pull away, but he lifted his hand to wave it off. The moment hung in the air fans, sensing something unusual was about to happen. The king of rock and roll was known for spotting things others missed. Tonight, it was a boy who seemed invisible to everyone else. Elvis's gaze stayed fixed. Security hesitated, unsure whether to move the child along. But Elvis walked forward, each step deliberate, through the murmurs of the crowd. The boy looked up, startled. His grip tightened on the candy box, knuckles whitening. He hadn't expected this. Not the one man the world clamored to see standing right in front of him. Eyewitnesses recall the hush. Tourists stopped talking, guards stepped back, cameras froze in mid-click. For a heartbeat, the scene belonged only to 2 people, a boy with cracked shoes, and a legend whose eyes caught his. The child tried to speak, but his rehearsed words tangled. The cardboard sign slipped slightly in his hand, and Elvis leaned in closer. The cliffhanger sharpened in that silence. What would he say? What would he do, in front of everyone, with a child the world had nearly overlooked? The crowd expected Elvis to keep walking, maybe give a polite smile. Instead, he stopped just a few feet away from the boy. Then came the disruption no one predicted. Elvis Presley, the man who filled arenas, lowered himself to one knee on the gravel. Gasps cut through the air. Cameras flashed wildly, but Elvis didn't glance at them. His attention locked only on the child. Dust from the driveway clung to the cuff of his jacket as he leaned closer, closing the gap between stardom and survival. "What's your name, son?" His voice, usually booming from a stage, came out soft. The boy's lips trembled. "Danny," he whispered, barely audible over the clicking shutters. Elvis nodded slowly, as if memorizing it. "Danny, that's a good name." The boy shifted his weight. His cardboard box shook in his small hands. "I'm selling these for my mom," his voice cracked, a child rehearsing a grown man's duty. "She says we need to pay bills. So I'm helping." Elvis didn't interrupt. Witnesses remember his posture leaning in slightly. nodding at every word, giving the boy the sense he was the only person there. The world-famous entertainer became an audience of one. Fans pressed closer, but the hush deepened. For many, the only sound was the faint hiss of an amplifier still humming inside the rehearsal hall. Carried faintly into the night air, Danny hesitated, then blurted the truth. Most people don't stop. The words hung heavy. Even in a city like Memphis, where poverty and wealth crossed paths daily, a child's quiet confession cut deeper than music ever could. Elvis glanced at the sign. The marker ink had smudged from sweaty fingers. "Help my family," for words that told a whole story. According to neighbors later interviewed, Danny's father had been laid off that summer from a factory job. His mother cleaned houses when she could. Rent was overdue and groceries were scarce. Danny had taken it on himself to help, standing by the Graceland gates because he thought just maybe someone generous might pass by, and tonight, he had found the one man who refused to pass him by. Elvis placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but witnesses say the crowd reacted with audible gasps. Some fans wiped their eyes. "You're doing a brave thing," Elvis said, his tone firm yet gentle. "Takes a lot of courage to stand out here." Danny looked down, ashamed. "People laugh sometimes. They don't buy anything." Elvis shook his head. "Well, I'm not laughing." The boy lifted his eyes. For a brief second, the spotlight of Graceland caught them, and the reflection of those wide, uncertain pupils was brighter than the flashbulbs behind him. And then Elvis did something else. He stood, squared his shoulders, and reached for the box. He pulled it from Danny's hands with a nod. The crowd leaned in. Would Elvis just buy a single candy bar and send him off? Would he give a quick autograph and retreat? Or would this moment turn into something no one there would ever forget? The answer would come in the next beat, setting in motion a chain of kindness that reached far beyond the gates of Graceland. 2. Danny, it had been a burden carried all day. The child's shoulders slumped in. Elvis lifted the cardboard box into his hands. The weight was nothing to him, but relief, as though someone had just lifted more than candy bars off his back. The crowd leaned forward, breathless. Elvis didn't just pick a bar, he looked at the entire box, then slipped his hand into his pocket. Crisp bills appeared, folded thick. Eyewitnesses recall him pressing the money into Danny's hand with a quiet firmness. It wasn't the price of a single candy bar. It was enough to cover the whole box and then some. "Keep your change," Elvis said with a wink. The boy stared, frozen. His fingers curled around the bills like they might vanish if he let go. His lips parted, but no words came. The fans erupted into murmurs. Some clapped, some called out his name. But Elvis didn't turn to the crowd. He wasn't done. Instead of walking away, Elvis passed the candy box to one of his bodyguards. "Take this inside," he said. Then he added, "and bring some bags from the kitchen. Groceries, as much as you can carry." The guard blinked, startled. "Groceries, boss?" "You heard me. Fill the car." Minutes later, staff from inside Graceland returned, arms heavy with paper bags. Brown sacks rustled in the night air, filled with bread, milk, fruit, and canned goods from the mansion's kitchen. The smell of fresh oranges cut through the exhaust fumes by the gate. Witnesses remember the crowd breaking into applause. Strangers wiped their eyes. Some cheered. Others whispered in disbelief. This wasn't charity for show. It was instinct. Danny's expression shifted from shock to something deeper. His eyes welled, his lip trembled. He looked as though he might crumble under the weight of kindness he hadn't expected. Elvis crouched again, leaning close so only the boy could hear. According to one fan nearby, he said, "Nobody sells candy alone when I'm around." The boy's tears spilled, catching the glow of the security lights. His small frame shook as he tried to steady himself. And yet, Elvis wasn't finished. He called over another guard. "Put the bags in the back of a car. This boy isn't walking home alone tonight." Danny's jaw dropped. "You mean you're giving all this to us?" His voice was a whisper, disbelieving. Elvis gave a small nod. "Yes, son. To you, your mama, and whoever else is waiting for you at home." The crowd clapped again, louder this time, their voices swelling like a wave. But Elvis barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on Danny, watching the boy's trembling hands try to hold on to both the money and the miracle. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Elvis looked at the fans behind the gates and raised his voice. "Let's make sure he knows he's not alone. Give him a hand, folks." Applause thundered. Some fans started singing softly, just a few lines of "Love Me Tender." The sound drifted into the night, surrounding Danny in a chorus of strangers' voices. For the boy who had whispered "Most people don't stop," the moment flipped on its head. Tonight, thousands had stopped, and one man had turned the spotlight entirely onto him. Elvis placed the last bag of groceries into the car trunk himself, brushing dust off his hands. He turned back toward Danny, gave a small smile, and patted his shoulder again. The boy tried to speak, but his throat closed. Only tears came. And as the car door opened, the headlights illuminating the road ahead, one question lingered. What would happen when Elvis followed this child home? Engines rumbled as the car door opened. Elvis motioned Danny forward, guiding him with a gentle hand at his back. The boy hesitated, glancing at the crowd still buzzing behind the gates. He had walked to Graceland alone, expecting rejection. Now he was stepping into a Cadillac loaded with groceries. Elvis leaned toward his driver. "Make sure he gets home safe. I'll be right behind you." The headlights flared, cutting across the gravel. Danny slid into the seat, the candy money still clutched in his hand. The paper bills were damp from his grip. Inside the car, witnesses said Elvis's driver struck up quiet conversation. "Where do you live, son?" Danny gave an address, a neighborhood across town known for hard times. The driver glanced at Elvis in the mirror. Elvis only nodded, signaling to follow. The procession rolled out first, the Cadillac with Danny inside, then a second car carrying Elvis himself. The tires hummed against the road as Graceland faded behind them. Danny stared out the window. Streetlights flashed across his face, each beam revealing a mix of awe and disbelief. The brown grocery bags shifted in the seat beside him. The smell of apples and fresh bread filled the car, scents almost foreign to a child used to bare shelves. According to the driver, Elvis kept asking gentle questions from the car behind. He wanted to know about the family. How many at home? How's the mother holding up? His voice carried steady concern. Danny spoke in shy bursts. His father had been out of work for months. His mother stretched meals to cover the week. Sometimes, he admitted, dinner was nothing more than cornbread. The car turned off the main road, the pavement giving way to cracked concrete. Houses grew smaller, paint peeling, porches sagging. Porch lights flickered weakly. Elvis watched it all from the second car, his eyes fixed ahead. Neighbors noticed the procession. Curtains parted. A Cadillac rolling into the block at night was unusual enough, but a second car following closely behind stirred whispers. Faces pressed to windows, wondering why headlights glided toward one particular house. The Cadillac slowed in front of a small weathered home. The siding was chipped. The steps sagged. A single bulb glowed weakly above the door. Danny's breath quickened. He opened the door carefully, as if afraid the moment might shatter. He turned back to the driver. This is it. Behind them, Elvis's car eased to a stop. The door opened. Neighbors leaned further out of their windows. When Elvis Presley stepped onto the street, voices rose in startled recognition. Is that? That's Elvis. Whispers turned to gasps. One woman across the street covered her mouth, nearly dropping her laundry basket. A man leaned against a porch post, shaking his head in disbelief. But Elvis paid no mind. He walked directly toward the house, his pace calm but certain. The gravel crunched beneath his boots. Danny ran up the steps, calling out, "Mama! Mama, come quick." The screen door creaked open. A woman appeared, apron still tied around her waist, her hands damp from washing dishes. She squinted into the headlights, and then she froze. Her breath caught. The dish rag slipped from her fingers onto the wooden porch. For a long moment, she didn't move, staring as the world's most famous entertainer carried a bag of groceries toward her door. The neighborhood went silent. Even the crickets seemed to pause. What would she say? What would happen when Elvis Presley, uninvited and unexpected, stepped into a kitchen that had been nearly empty just hours before? The answer would leave her in tears, the entire street in awe. The porch light flickered above as Elvis stepped closer, the brown grocery bag still tucked under his arm. Danny's mother stood frozen in the doorway, eyes wide, apron damp from dishwater. For a heartbeat, she seemed unable to move. "Mama," Danny whispered, tugging her sleeve. "He bought everything. He came with me." Her lips parted, but no words came. She pressed a hand to her mouth, as though steadying herself against the weight of the moment. Elvis gave a small smile. "Evening, ma'am. Thought we'd help fill your pantry tonight." Neighbors crowded along the sidewalk, whispering and craning necks. Some clutched their children closer, pointing in disbelief. But Elvis's focus remained entirely on the woman in the doorway. She stepped back, motioning him inside. The hinges squeaked as the screen door opened. Elvis ducked his head slightly and entered the modest home. The kitchen was small, its linoleum floor worn thin. The refrigerator hummed weakly, its enamel chipped. Elvis set the grocery bag on the counter, then glanced at the shelves. Sparse, a few cans, a nearly empty loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter with a spoon still inside. "Let's fix this," Elvis said softly. He motioned for the guards to carry in more bags. Soon, the counter filled with milk, eggs, fruit, and packages of meat. The smell of fresh produce overwhelmed the faint odor of boiled cabbage. Lingering in the room, Danny's mother leaned against the wall, tears brimming. We didn't expect." Her voice broke. Elvis shook his head gently. "No need to explain. You've got a brave boy here. He's looking out for you." Danny blushed, eyes fixed on the floor. His mother reached down, pulling him close, her hand resting on his hair. The boy buried his face against her side. Witnesses later said Elvis moved with quiet dignity, carrying bags himself despite staff offering to help. At one point, he opened the refrigerator door and frowned at its near emptiness. He turned to the mother and said, "This fridge ought to stay full for a while." From his jacket, he pulled a plain envelope. He placed it carefully on the counter beside the groceries. "For bills?" "For whatever's needed," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. The mother gasped. She pressed both hands to her face, tears streaming freely now. "I don't know how to thank you." Elvis stepped forward, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "No thanks needed. Just keep raising this boy with that kind of courage. You should be proud of him." Danny peeked up, his eyes wet but shining. Elvis bent down slightly, meeting his gaze once more. "Remember, son, you're never alone in this world." At that, the boy broke. Sobs shook his small frame as he clung to Elvis, arms wrapping tightly around his waist. Witnesses say Elvis held him there, not rushing, letting the hug last as long as the boy needed. The neighbors at the door wiped their own eyes. The sight of Elvis Presley, global icon, standing in a faded kitchen, hugging a child with trembling shoulders, was something they would never forget. When Danny finally loosened his grip, Elvis tousled his hair lightly. "I'll be checking in again," he promised. The mother, still stunned, asked, "You mean you'll come back?" Elvis gave a simple nod. "You'll see me again." That promise hung in the air, heavier than money, louder than applause. It was a vow no one in that small home expected to hear. And yet, outside the door, questions swirled. If Elvis truly meant it, what would the next visit bring? A week later, in the same quiet neighborhood, a knock echoed against the worn wooden door. Danny's mother wiped her hands on her apron, just as she had the night Elvis first arrived. She opened the door, expecting a neighbor instead. A man in a Graceland jacket stood holding a guitar case. Behind him, the sunlight caught the polished surface of the instrument inside. "This is from Mr. Presley," the staff member said gently. He handed over the case, along with a small envelope tucked under the handle. Danny ran from the back room, his eyes widening as the case was lowered into his hands. He fumbled with the latches, his small fingers trembling. The lid opened, revealing a brand new guitar. The wood glowed honey brown under the light. 6 unplayed strings shimmered with promise. His breath caught. "For me," he whispered. The staff member nodded toward the envelope. Danny's mother tore it open carefully, pulling out a single folded note. The handwriting was unmistakable, bold yet personal. "For your boy, so he remembers he's never alone." Elvis, the room fell silent. Danny lifted the guitar carefully, as though it were made of glass. His fingers strummed a single chord, awkward but bright. The sound filled the small kitchen, echoing against the same walls that had once held only worry and hunger. Tears welled in his mother's eyes. She pressed the note to her chest, whispering, "He'll never forget this. None of us will." Neighbors soon gathered at the porch again, peeking through the open door. Word spread quickly. Elvis had kept his promise. He hadn't just given food. He had given hope in the form of music. Witnesses later said Danny played that guitar every evening, teaching himself chords until his fingertips ached. The gift wasn't just wood and strings, it was a reminder that someone saw him, believed in him, and cared enough to leave a piece of himself behind. For Elvis, it was one more act of kindness in a lifetime of quiet generosity. For Danny's family, it was the moment their story changed forever. The king didn't just sing about love and tenderness. He lived it in kitchens, on porches, and in the hearts of strangers who became family for one unforgettable night.